Welcome! My name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, the animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. Today we are diving into the mind of Makoto Shinkai with his 2016 original animated film, Your Name. With a twisting plot and superb visuals, Your Name is one of our absolute favorites, and I am thrilled to have Emma Martin joining me today to discuss the love story of Taki and Mitsuha. Big spoiler warning for anyone who has yet to see this film. Your Name is absolutely fantastic, and it kind of has a shock value in the plot that really should be experienced yourself. So if you are still hoping to see the film and have not yet, one option is to, pause, go watch it, and come back. Or you can just jump to the 37-minute mark of this episode. You'll skip all of our talk about the plot and the characters and anything like that that's big and spoilery. Later on in the episode, we talk about Makoto Shinkai, the director and writer, his style and filmography, as well as just more technical aspects of the film, and we won't be talking about spoilers in that section. So again, if you want to skip the spoilers, go to the 37-minute mark. But if you have seen the film or aren't afraid of massive spoilers, then let's get started and let's get animated. I am here with Emma Martin. Emma, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so blessed to have you in the same room as me. It's always a joy doing these podcasts in person with my friends.
So wonderful to be here with you.
And we've had this on the docket for forever.
Seriously. Forever. And that's because it's sacred ground, right? Just like Tangled. It took a while because it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's my number two favorite film of the decade. Excuse me. Whoa. Don't want to forget about How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
But
as far as anime films, would you say it's the first?
Anime films? Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
Your Name is on the top of my list. Of all time, honestly, anime films.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
Like, for me, it's a close tie with Silent Voice, but Your Name has just a little extra spark that is really like, oh yeah, this is the best.
It's so good. And we're going to tell you why Your Name is so great. If you don't already know, which you should.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Your Name was a 2016 Japanese film written and directed by Makoto Shinkai. And it is about so many things. But it's kind of like a Freaky Friday in the sense that there are two people who are switching bodies. But other than that, it's not like Freaky Friday at all.
Right.
But it's just a good cultural pinpoint to understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. There are two teenagers.
Taki and Mitsuha.
Taki is a boy who lives in Tokyo with his father and works a job and, has all the struggles of a teenage boy. And
yes. In the city life, all bustling and whatnot.
Yes. And then Mitsuha lives in a small country town, and she lives with her grandmother and her younger sister, and they run the temple and the shrine that are in the town. So her life is much more calm in a lot of ways. Although, to her, there are some things that are a big deal, like her father is running for mayor, and he is the mayor currently, and, again, the struggles of teenage life are there.
Very eminent in this film.
Very eminent. So it's about these two characters, and they end up switching bodies at random points, and so they will wake up some days in the other person's body, and that obviously leads to a lot of complications. And the story just goes on from there. I know I've already said this in the intro, but spoiler warning, we're going to be talking about this film, spoilers, and I just want you to know right now, if you have not seen it, please just, come back and listen to us later for sure, but stop listening, go rent the DVD, Find it on iTunes. It's so good, and like you just need to experience it for yourself.
It has a specific shock factor that really requires you to just not know anything about what's about to happen.
Yes. Speaking of the shock factor, I decided to see this film, and it came to the US in 2017, and I was just like scrolling through Tumblr, and I saw an ad for it, and I was like, oh, that looks like something right up my alley, right? You know? Mm-hmm. And so I watched the trailer on YouTube, and I was like, the trailer, oh man, this looks so... it looks so fun. Yeah, it looks like this, like, fun rom-com of, like, oh, they're switching bodies, how funny, you know? And, like, you know, it gets them into trouble and whatever, and I'm like, I'm gonna go see this film. I'm just gonna go see it right now. Mm-hmm. And so I had a free day, so I, you know, saw it that afternoon, and, I was like, I did not sign up for this. What did I get myself into? And it was in all the most beautiful and perfect ways. And then of course, yeah, I told you to go see it.
Yeah, and then you went with me, remember? We went to the theater, and I think with one other friend, and we watched it together because you were really excited about the film, and I was like, I'm down, let's let this happen. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, flashbacks to From Up on Poppy Hill kind of shock factor.
Yes.
If you've ever seen the film, that's also a great one. But it was absolutely breathtaking, but way more of an emotional experience than any of us were expecting.
It's so much deeper than I thought it was going to go. And yeah, Kate went with us, and she loved it too. And I feel like this is a really good gateway anime for people.
Totally, yes.
Because I show it to people who have never seen anime or don't like anime, and they love this film.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a good point. Like, if, like, you know somebody who is unsure about anime and all its genres, like, this is a great starter one to just enter into the realm, because it's just a lovely story. Like, maybe a little confusing at the beginning if you're not following. Yes. So maybe, like, watch it with a friend. Right. But other than that, like, it's a great gateway, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's so universal, and Makoto Shinkai says, like, with his works, he doesn't try to stick, you know, Japanese anime film, especially, you know, animated stuff, is, you know, everyone wants to try to be like Miyazaki, but Makoto Shinkai tries to not do that, and to just, like, you know, do things that are appealing to, like, wider audiences, you know? So that's really great and really evident in this film. But like you said, when like I saw it I showed my sister this film, we did have to pause a few times to explain what was going on.
Right.
And honestly, it blooms even further with subsequent viewings. Like,
oh, definitely, there's definitely trinkets you pick up every time.
Yeah, because it's one of those complex time weaving narratives that is just done really impeccably and has a really great narrative structure, and it's hard to do good, like, time travel, quote unquote, like, stories. It's just hard to write that, like, because it has to be so tight and so solid. And this one, there's not a single plot hole in it. It's amazing.
Especially with time, like, there always has to be a set of rules that has to be followed, and this just does it splendidly. So should we talk about the twist that we keep talking about?
Yes, so if you haven't seen the film, these two teenagers are switching bodies and wreaking havoc on each other's lives and totally developing crushes on each other. And then suddenly the switches stop, and then the audience follows Taki, and he's, like, trying to find Mitsuha because none of his texts go through. He can't call her. Like, it's always saying, like, you know, out of, like, this phone number has been disconnected, or is out of line or reach or whatever. And so he's like, fine, I'm just gonna go find her because, like, you know, he misses her.
Yeah, it's super cute.
He's super cute.
And he's very artistic, so he's, like, drawn pictures of all the sights he's seen when he's been in her body. Yeah. So he's going based off of his drawings more than anything, because I don't think he knows the name of the town that she's in.
He doesn't, because every time they wake up, they, like, start to forget things.
Right.
from their experiences as the other person. So that's why they write each other notes, and they like write out diary entries so that, you know, they can keep track of everything that's going on. And so that's all he has to go off of. And then his like imagery, he's like drawing all these pictures. And so he and his friends travel all across like the countryside, just looking for the, you know, looking at different shrines and mountainous areas. And they go on like this little weekend getaway to trying to find Mitsuha. And they end up running into a couple who, a guy who used to live there. He's like, oh yeah, I grew up in Itomori. And he brings them there, and then you find out it's been destroyed by a meteor that hit, and
it's a big crater, basically.
It's a big crater, and it's just like I pause, I hesitate, because even just thinking about it, like your heart like drops to the pit of your stomach. Like the way it's done is handled so well. And the music in this entire film is great, but just like everything just makes you feel things so deeply.
Oh yeah, I listen to the soundtrack on repeat when I'm in the car because it is just so beautiful and touching. It's like happy but also emotional, and I just love listening to it. But that moment that he realizes this city is gone and this girl is probably gone too. And because doesn't he end up researching later
so it just
to find
builds.
her name.
Right, it builds and builds, and suddenly the diary entries are gone and he's forgetting things, and they go and research Itomori, and they look through a book of the victims, and it's like hundreds of people that lost their lives in this disaster.
Right.
And he finds her name, Mitsuha.
But what's really interesting was more of the shock factor for myself, was when he was researching and realized that the meteor hit like 3 years prior, wasn't it? Was it 3 years?
Yeah, it was 3 years.
And so that hit me, and I was like, wait, he's been like corresponding with a girl who's been dead for 3 years?
Right.
That was the shock factor for me.
Yeah, it's a huge shock. I mean, there are so many different pieces where you go, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Because again, it's just laid out so well. Like, even the part, you know, where you find out that Mitsuha also went to go find Taki. Except she was 3 years in the past.
Right.
So she ditches school and takes a train to Tokyo for a day to try to find Taki. And when she finally runs into him, he doesn't know her because he hasn't met her yet. And so she gives him her hair. She wears this red hair ribbon the whole time.
Which is a big symbol, and we'll get to that.
A big symbol. And she gives it to him. And throughout the whole film, he's been wearing this ribbon on his wrist as like a good luck charm. And it's not until then that you realize it's Mitsuha's ribbon.
Right.
So good. Well, braided cord. It's a braided cord. Sure. But, you know.
So in the shrine, that they would make these braided cords and then wear them in their hair, or in this case, she put it around Taki's wrist as kind of like a bracelet. And what's significant about them is that it's a long practice of weaving that takes time, and in that, their grandmother is teaching her, like, and her sister about how time is like the cord and fate is like the cord. Each thing weaves together, and you don't always understand how it works, and sometimes it takes a long time to get the finished product, but it's all weaving together into one beautiful piece of work. And so that's just kind of the symbolism that ties throughout the whole show, is that the fate of these two people being joined together in a sense.
Yes.
I don't know if you would say, like, what kind of connection they have, but they're flipping bodies, obviously, so they're connected in a way, and just tying that to fate and bringing them back together eventually.
Yeah. Eventually.
But the road there is long.
The road there is quite long. So, just going forward with the story, after Taki discovers this, he's starting to forget things like her name, and that's a common part, obviously, which is why it's called Your Name. But
what's your name?
Your Name. But he does remember when he was in Mitsuha's body at one point. Mitsuha's grandmother took him and and the sister up to the old location, the location of the old shrine. And it's like way up in the mountain, and they left their like sake for the god. It's just a tradition that, you know, they don't remember why they do it anymore. They don't have records of it. But
it's kind of gross, and then she chews some rice and then spits it in the cup, and then it ferments, and that's what makes the sake. So kind of gross, but it's a tradition.
It's a tradition, right. And so Taki goes and tries to find that shrine, and he does. He finds it, and it, again, just everything visually is great, and we'll definitely talk about that. But what I love is that, like, you can tell time has passed because, like, the water has risen in that stream, and like everything is just a little different. And when he gets into the shrine, like the sakes are there, and they're like covered with like moss and stuff, and so he drinks Mitsuha's sake.
Yummy.
Yummy. That's been sitting in a cave for 3 years.
You know, I want to find a man up there. Just kidding. Let's slow down. Okay. Continue.
Yeah, slow down, Emma. We drink your sake. Okay. That's going to be a new phrase. I'm going to just like make fun of you for that forever.
Okay, great.
I love it. Okay. And this leads into another really great sequence of like, he basically like travels through time and like sees all of these things about her life, and like it's just a really beautifully visual segment of the film where like everything kind of melds into each other, and it's really pretty.
Right. He's entering back into her life and eventually back into her body in the past because he's like drinking a part of her. Like her sake is like an essence of who Mitsuha is, as it was an offering before the gods. So in this sense, he's like consuming a part of her, and so that's what connects him back, ties the ribbon back, the cords back together, because somehow it's been separated, obviously, when they lost connection.
And so then he does wake up in her body again in the past, and on the day that the meteor is supposed to hit, and he has one day to fix it, to like get everyone to safety, and they do, and it's amazing, and it's so, oh man, the tension in this film is so great. It's great.
When he's running to, as in her body, running to the mayor to go and convince him to get the people to evacuate, that soundtrack right there is like the most stressful thing for me. Like, I always skip that one on the soundtrack because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a time crunch. But yeah, it's amazing because hardly anyone gets hurt, and almost everyone is evacuated, and there's like very minor injuries. So they describe it as like a miracle of how it happened. But it also fires back on Mitsuha's father, who's running for mayor, because they think it's some sort of conspiracy that he knew exactly when to get them to safety. Exactly.
One of the things I love about, you know, them just trying to get everyone to safety is the part where, you know, they're interacting with her father, because when Taki is in Mitsuha's body and, demanding that, you know, he call everyone to the high school where it's safe zone, Mitsuha's father is like, no, absolutely not, and like is almost like he can tell it's not Mitsuha. Like he has this like wait, who are, like, you know, what's going on? And that, what I love is that it's only when Mitsuha gets back into her own body that she's able to do it. She's able to convince him, because it has to be from her, you know?
Right. Now, how Mitsuha gets back into her body, that happens on the mountaintop.
Oh my gosh.
Which is probably the best scene. So Taki has gone up to the mountaintop in her body, and it's like there's this perfect time, kind of like golden hour in a photography terms. Like, it's like this one moment in time where like their paths are both connected, and finally that happens. And so they're calling out to each other, and finally they see each other.
Yes.
It's beautiful. And so that's when they go back into their original bodies. So by that time, now Mitsuha, it's up to her to finish what Taki was trying to do that day. And she ends up being the one convincing the mayor as herself, which, confidence boost.
Yeah.
But that scene on the mountains is just breathtaking.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, so good. That's also when they start to write on each other's hands, because they want to remember each other's name. Because as Kelly said, when they were waking up from each other's bodies, like, they were starting to lose memory, and that's why they recorded things. But gosh darn it, as Taki is writing, he writes, "I love you" on her hand instead. Which is great, Taki, but come on.
Like, it's the sweetest thing, but it's like, it doesn't help her out.
It doesn't help her at all. But it is, like, in the moment, you're just, like, crying because it's the most beautiful and precious thing ever.
It is. And that's another part where, like, my heart drops to my stomach, is they do this so well. Taki has written on Mitsuha's hand, and then he gives the pen to Mitsuha, and she's about to write something, and then it just cuts, and she's gone. And, like, it doesn't, and the pen drops to the ground, and it's just, like, all of a sudden, it's just out of nowhere. It's so good. It's so, because you're in the midst of this really intimate moment with them.
Right.
And she disappears.
And then, Taki disappears, because then it's Mitsuha's turn to...
No,
run.
It's Taki. Taki there. Mitsuha is writing on his hand, and she disappears, and the pen falls to the ground.
Oh, that's right.
And then he has a moment where he's like, "It's okay. I'll remember your name. I'll remember your name." And then, again, this is all visual. Oh, it's so good. But he has that, and then he suddenly has that look on his face like, oh no, and he grabs for the pen, and he's going to write it down, and he's like, oh no, I can't remember. Like, oh, it's so good.
Yes, and it all happens so fast.
It's so fast, and then he's suddenly like, why am I here? I was here for something important. I was here for someone important. Like, I wanted to be with it. Oh my gosh.
Right, because he's back in his time, like, instead of her present.
Yes, and he forgets. Just watching him lose his memory of all of especially right after this very intimate scene with the two of them, and then suddenly he's forgetting everything, is so, it's done so well, and it just makes me cry.
And yeah, your heart is just broken instantly because of all that they've been through together, and then he just doesn't remember. And, like, eventually, like, when he's talking, like, just in his downtime with friends, he's like, oh, remember that time we took that random trip to the mountains? And
yeah.
I don't remember why we went there. Like, things like that just, like, kill me. It's like, oh, just twist the dagger, why don't you?
Right. Oh, my goodness. It's crazy. And when she does discover that he wrote I love you on her hand, it's literally the best. It's just like,
That's all it is right there.
That sigh.
So as we said, eventually everyone is saved, and life goes on. Yeah. People rebuild towns and move on with their lives and grow up. And that's what takes us to the end of the movie.
Yes. And you get a glimpse of them at the very beginning of the film as they're older, and they are narrating kind of like, oh, there's something that I'm missing, in my life, and all of that. And so when everyone is safe from the meteor, they kind of jump back to that present time, and they both are living in Tokyo, living their lives. They just have this feeling that, like, something's missing, and
that fate needs to be connected again.
Because they're connected. And so you see, as the audience, we follow Taki through his life as he's, like, going to job interviews and, figuring things out.
Adulting,
yeah. Hashtag adulting. Trying to figure out his life. And in the background, we see Mitsuha several times. And it's so annoying because you're just like, turn around, Taki, gosh dang it.
You're so close.
You're so close to her. And then finally, after waiting, they see each other on opposite trains. And then they both have realized, the thing I've been waiting for, the thing I've been missing, is someone, and so they both like run after each other.
Right, total montage of trying to find each other. And it's like they don't know who the other person is.
Right.
But they like there's like a spark moment. The music changes when they connect eyes. So they know that like I don't know why, but I'm meant to be with this person.
Yeah.
I love it. So then there's the montage of them running from bus stop to bus stop just to like reconnect again until they finally, I think Taki is at the bottom of the stairs and he's like almost ready to give up. It's one or the other, but
yeah,
like,
she's walking down the stairs and he is walking up the stairs.
Right. And they're kind of like looking down as if like almost like they're giving up. But
because it's a little awkward, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you don't want to just randomly talk to a stranger.
Right. Like, hey, by the way, I think we're supposed to be together.
Yeah,
like,
I think I
do
know
that all
you.
the time. Anyway.
Like, do I know you?
But as soon as they pass each other on the stairs, there's that spark again. And finally, they make a connection.
Yeah. Taki, I mean, both of them, again, with the visuals, it's like all these really subtle acting details that the animators use. And they both, like, do this sigh after they like pass each other because they're like not going to talk to each other, and you're just, you know, as an audience member, you're just screaming like, just talk to them. And then Taki finally turns around and is like, you know, have we met before? And she's like, I felt that way too. And then of course they end the film with their
ask your name?
Boom, end. Credits roll.
Everybody's crying.
Everyone's crying. They finally...
or at least Kelly and Emma are. But
right. Man, I know that's a lot of story, especially if you're still listening to this and you haven't seen the film. It is. It's a lot. It's complex, but it's like well done and well executed, and that's part of why I absolutely adore this film.
Yeah, I think going piece by piece through the story is really important to discuss because it really emphasizes how the director just really pieced everything together so well. I mean, I keep thinking about like, you know, at the beginning of the story, they're switching bodies and there's no preference as to why they're switching bodies. It's just happening.
Right.
And so it's not until Mitsuha puts the bracelet on Taki in the past that you're like, oh my gosh, that's how they were first connected.
Yes.
Like that chord, and that's where it all started. But it's just incredible. Like, you don't find that out until like halfway through the film. So
right.
It's just like beautifully pieced together.
And there's still like little hints and mysteries and things. And like one of the realizations you kind of have as you've watched it several times, or maybe if you're paying really close attention, is that like the original purpose of that shrine that Mitsuha's family has taken care of was because of the meteor, because you can see both, they mention that the lake that the town is by was formed by a crater from a long time ago. So this place has been hit by a meteor before. And even where the shrine is located, that's like in another crater. So it's like, it's almost as if like this area is always hit with meteors at some points in history. And, they lost the meaning of why they had that shrine and all these rituals to begin with.
Right.
But that kind of is the meaning, because even her grandmother says that she used to have dreams like that too, and they've all had these dreams leading up to Mitsuha
Stars,
and Taki.
they are literally star-crossed lovers.
Oh,
the stars are connecting them. Wow.
Wow, that's so great. Oh my goodness. Speaking of stars and meteors, the meteor is absolutely beautiful.
Yes, because not only is it just a meteor, but it splits in two.
Uh-huh.
And the part that splits off is what ends up destroying the town. But that meteor is just gorgeous.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's just every time it's on screen, you're just like, wow.
It's kind of like a mixture of a rainbow and the northern lights just going across the night sky. It's beautiful.
Oh my gosh, it's breathtaking. Another like really stunning moment for me is when they finally show you the meteor hitting the town, because you don't know for sure yet exactly what happens. They kind of leave it cliffhangery until the meteor has hit, and then they're like, oh, everyone was fine. But but all of a sudden, like, the music cuts out. Like, you're following the meteor, and it's beautiful, and there's this beautiful music, and it just seems all majestic and epic. And then all of a sudden, the music cuts out, and you see it falling into the town, and it just explodes isn't the right word, because if I say explodes, you're thinking of, like, an explosion of, like a big bomb or something, which this is kind of like that, but it's more just like the entire earth buckles, and everything is, like, thrown awry, and it's just another one of those moments where it's just, my stomach hurts, like, my stomach aches, because it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so it's such a devastating event.
Especially with how the animation works with the film, it just makes it that more real and, gut-wrenching.
Yes. I mean, this film knows how to wrench that gut.
Yeah, it's super fun the first half, and then the second half you're crying. So
yeah,
it's a roller coaster.
It is a roller coaster.
But that's what makes it so good, because
yes.
you're having a good time, you're tied into these characters' lives who are developing over time.
Yeah.
I mean, they're teenagers. They're learning about themselves,
right.
and, like, being in each other's bodies. They're learning to help one another out as they grow up. And then, you get, once you're attached to these characters, then you have to go through the pain with them too.
Yeah. So good. Before we go into production stuff, are there any other specific moments of the film that really stuck out to you and that you love?
Well, I have two that I want to mention. One is for a visual effect. I really love when Mitsuha is first going into Tokyo. And also when Taki is, like, just going to school in Tokyo. And just the shots of, like, the sun glistening on the buildings and whatnot. It is just so beautiful. Like, oh man, they know how to work the light. And so I just found that especially stunning.
And on top of that, like, this film, and honestly all of Shinkai's stuff, is known for, like, they go out and very specifically and deliberately and with a lot of detail animate and create places that actually exist. Like, these are city streets and city areas that, like, actually exist. Even like some random side street that they're on, or a bridge or whatever. It's like, these are places that are real. Except for Itamori. Itamori doesn't exist in real life.
It should. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, but in Tokyo, when they're in Tokyo.
Right, exactly. As far as just dear moments in general, one of my favorite, like, more funny moments of the film was when Mitsuha and her two friends are hanging out, and they're like, let's go to a cafe. And Mitsuha's like, what? This is a small town, country town. We have no cafe. And they ride on the bikes to this vending machine that has, like, iced coffee and whatnot. But then when she switches bodies with Taki and is a student, all the guys are like, hey, after school, let's go to a cafe. And she's like, a cafe? Like, what? And then she's, like, taking pictures of all the food that she's getting. Like, it's just so cute because she's just so excited to be somewhere where there's all these things she can try.
Right. And it's so normal for them in Tokyo that there's a cafe,
Right.
And it's
Taki's getting a little mad because she's spending all his money.
Right. I love that. And then Taki, when he's in Mitsuha's body, builds a table and chairs for their fake cafe outside, which is so sweet.
Right. Oh, it's lovely. So I would say that moment with the cafe is just precious to me.
Yes, I love that. Man, I just love, I don't think there's another specific moment. It's just all of the moments that I, like, honestly, there's just so many beautiful moments, like, visually stunning and just emotionally poignant moments that I absolutely love. I, of course, love the beginning when they are switching places and they're just making fun of each other and, like,
yes.
Messing
Poking
with
fun. I love it.
Messing with each other's lives.
Oh, and when they, like, write on each other's foreheads, like, stupid and, like, whatnot.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny. I really love, so right before they realize that, Taki realizes that there isn't another switch is the scene with, he has this crush on this girl he works with, and Mitsuha sets them up on a date, and so Taki gets to go on this date with her, and they could do a lot of things, but they go to a museum or a gallery exhibit, and the gallery exhibit is titled Nostalgia. And it's actually photographs of Itomori, and you have to be really paying attention to notice it.
Yep.
But it's a little clue as to what's going on, and because at that point in the film they have not revealed that Itomori was demolished, and so in his time period, like, this is they're remembering this place that used to exist and doesn't anymore. So
that's why this movie is so just beautiful, because of all those little details and pieces.
Little details.
Oh,
and of course
time.
he's on this date with this girl, but all he can think about is Mitsuha, so it's so sweet. Do you want to take a moment to talk about any other characters that you really love?
I would love to note Mitsuha's sister, her little sister, is one of my favorites.
Preach. Love it.
She is just so cute and so, like, realistic compared to her older sister. Like, Mitsuha is very much like, I want to move to the big city and I just want to be a grown-up and live my own life. And her sister's like, you're so dumb. Like, come on, just focus on the present. Like, just very realistic. But she's also the person who keeps experiencing the in-between body switches. Like, she doesn't know what's happening.
Yeah.
But she's the one who sees Mitsuha, like, in a daze, like, not realizing what happened the day before. Or she sees Mitsuha, like, acting like a boy in a girl's body. So,
yeah.
So she's, like, seeing all of it. And she's like, you're just a weirdo.
Yes.
But I just appreciate her so much. She's great.
She is such a fun character. I love her. I really love their grandmother as well. Like, she's such a sweetheart, but also just, like, such a strong woman. Like, she is definitely someone that these girls can look up to and, like, you know, strive to be more like. So, Your Name obviously is a phenomenal, and we all love it. And so does the rest of the world.
And if you don't, you should go watch it again.
Yes, please. It is the highest grossing anime film of all time. Because it's that amazing and everyone agrees.
In fact, wasn't Silent Voice released around the same time, but because, like, it was just such a fantastic film, like, a lot of people didn't hear about Silent Voice.
A Silent Voice, if it was released any other year, it would have been, like, a big deal.
Yeah, because it's a great film, too.
It is phenomenal. But because Your Name came out at the same time,
it got swapped.
Like, everyone was focusing on Your Name and wasn't focusing on Silent Voice. It's the fourth highest grossing film of all time in Japan. Your Name is.
Oh my gosh.
Fourth.
I didn't know that. That's
of
crazy.
all time, of live action or otherwise. The fourth highest grossing film of all time in Japan. Wow. Oh, man. It's the first anime film not directed by Miyazaki to earn over 100 million American dollars in the Japanese box office. So, just transferring that as 100 million American dollars, which is crazy. Again, that's why a lot of people call Makoto Shinkai, like, the next Hayao Miyazaki. But they're not the same at all. And also Shinkai, like, hates that title. But just because he's so successful, and Miyazaki is fake retiring again, although he's not. And, he's nearing the end of his life as a working animator. So, a lot of people look to Shinkai as, like, the next great animator for Japan, which makes sense. And I mean, what I love so dearly, and I love Miyazaki too. I don't think it's an if or, it's an and, we get both of these great artists. They're just very different. Not only because they're different generations, but also just in their histories and their, sensibilities. And so I just want to talk about Makoto Shinkai for a little bit because I'm a huge fan. So one thing that I really appreciate is that he and this is true, like, Miyazaki in somewhat ways too, but Makoto Shinkai writes all of his own original stories. Like, these aren't, I mean, they're kind of based on some things, and, like, stories or myths or legends, you know, he ties those in, but Your Name isn't, like, specifically, you know, adapted from a book or something.
Right.
It's like he creates his own original stories, which I love. And what he's really, really, really known for, and is so evident in his films, is his work with computer animation. Because although these are all 2D, they have such brilliant CGI, computer animated, like, elements merged with it, and it all looks so stunning and so beautiful. And Makoto Shinkai is such a perfectionist and makes everything look so real.
Absolutely. It's so breathtaking. Like, we've talked about the visuals throughout this podcast already, but just how everything just glimmers and is so realistic. It's taking that 2D animation and bringing 3D effects to it. It's phenomenal. It's
so good. And from the beginning of his career as an animator, because he didn't go to school for animation. He was a literature major, I believe. And he learned how to animate on his own, like, with his laptop. Like,
way to go.
Yeah, I mean, honestly.
Props.
And he says even, like, if he had, you know, been born 10 years earlier, he wouldn't have been an animator, because there, you know, he started animating at a time when there were, you know, there was equipment that he could use. And so his first short film, I think, was like 1998, I want to say. And he made it all on his own, by the way. And he's using computer animated elements to create this really, really fantastic, unique visuals. And that's why he's always trying to push the boundaries of computer animation. And it's just really, really, really evident in his films, especially with this one. Because there are times where, I mean, to a trained eye, you can kind of see, like, where that CGI elements are working. But to a general audience, it's like, wow, these are really, really amazing camera angles. And just what you can do in a 3D virtual space is so fantastic, and he utilizes it really well. Oh, it's so good. He also almost all of his films are about connection and communication, usually over long distances. Almost every single one of them.
Which we have described.
Yes. And so this one kind of takes that for a turn of, like, okay, a long distance communication through time even. But, like, one of his early works was, like, a couple, like, one is on Earth and one is in space. And, you know,
classic.
Like, classic. So he usually writes about romance, and it's always
Which I love.
Yes. And both in his writing and his stories and in his animation and his style, like, both of those things, you could just, and it makes me even more excited for what's to come, because you just look at all of his works of art with those two lenses, and you just see those two things developing more and more and more and more. And it's like, I don't mind that he writes about the same thing all the time, because it's always different and it's always a new take, and he continues to develop ideas within this genre, and it's so good.
So good.
Another thing he adds to his writing is, like, a lot of science fiction elements, and it's not overboard, like Your Name especially, I should say, because it's like a little bit of this fantasy element within a modern day setting. But it never feels like it's specifically fantasy, specifically sci-fi. Like, the elements of those things never takes me out of the experience. It feels natural. Like, the way he uses those, you know, switching bodies elements never pulls me out of the story.
Absolutely, yeah. It doesn't feel, like, out of place, like suddenly we discovered a magic shrine. Like, it all feels completely natural. Like, both Mitsuha and Taki are more like having a spiritual experience with each other more than anything. So, yes, it's very natural.
And I found an article online where there's an interview with Makoto Shinkai, and this was before Your Name, like, I want to say, I'm trying to remember, it was like 2012 or something. And again, this movie came out in 2016. But I think they were talking more about Children Who Chase Lost Voices, which is another film he did. And he said, quote, "I think that science fiction can, by creating extreme situations and settings, draw out the essence of human relationships," unquote. Again, he's all about those relationships and communication, and I love it.
Which, isn't that what we really want at the end of the day? Like, it's fun to see magic and action and all these cool effects, but at the end of the day, we're looking for relatability. You know, we watch a romance because we like to see two great people end up together and work together through life's problems. And in the same way, like, you know, we have two kids who are literally star-crossed lovers who are trying to find each other and reconnect and communicate with each other because they share a bond. And I just love that he's all about that, because human relationships are so relatable, obviously, and something that the audience can really connect with.
Earlier you had mentioned the lighting in this film, which again, I love and adore, and it's, again, if you've listened to this podcast at all, I always end up talking about the lighting because it's something I really look forward to, and because it really creates a different atmosphere.
It's the cherry on top, honestly, with animation. It just makes everything come to life and look more realistic, too.
Truly, and just sets tone, you know, for the scene. And so in, like, the analog age and, like, older animated films, there's a very clear distinction between the cell and the background. And that's true for most animation in general. But it used to be much more separate and much harder to make those two things, like, be cohesive. So the action of a character on top of a background. And those two elements didn't always merge. Kind of like how in some older films, you can kind of tell exactly what elements of the scenery the characters are going to interact with because they look different than the other parts of the background, you know? Mm-hmm. And because of that clear distinction, it was harder to create cohesive lighting effects across all elements. But with computers, and what Makoto Shinkai really focuses on, is trying to use CGI and 2D animation and making sure everything looks like it is cohesive, both in the actionable elements and the backgrounds and the lighting, and making it all cohesive. And he just does a really good job of it, okay?
It comes together.
Oh, it's so great.
I think that's why the moment that Taki and Mitsuha share on top of the mountain is one of my favorite moments of the whole film, is just because you get that glow of the sunset, but also, like, just the fact that they're on mountains, like, the lighting, the sun is shining, like, at a different angle than, like, down in the town, and it just really makes it an intimate, beautiful moment. I just love the lighting in that scene in particular.
Basically, what it all comes down to is Makoto Shinkai is phenomenal. All of his works are phenomenal. And I'm so excited for everything else that he's going to create. Like, he has a whole career in front of him, and it's already proving so fruitful, even after he has all eyes on him, you know? Mm-hmm. And especially with Your Name, he's definitely, you know, garnered a lot of acclaim and a lot of support, and tons of great people on his team to, you know, to work with him, and hopefully a lot more you know, opportunities to make really great films.
Absolutely. I'm excited to see more of his work in the future, because I love his pieces of work. They're just phenomenal. And I mean, we already got another one, Weathering with You, that just came out, which we both saw, and that was equally just as stunning visually. It was amazing. So I'm really looking forward to his work.
Me too. So if you've made it this far into the podcast, what we're saying is go watch it. And I know we say that about everything, but, like, seriously, if you have not watched this film and you are a human being on the planet, like, I don't think there are any, like, certain things you should enjoy or like, or if you like movies, like, just go see, like, honestly, I think any movie fan will get something out of this film.
Mm-hmm. And like we said at the beginning, if you're new to anime, this is a great starting place. Like, it's just a beautiful romantic story about two teenagers, and it's fantastic. And that will be a great gateway for you to see the beauty of animation.
Absolutely. Now's the time of the podcast where I ask you, Emma, what have you been watching recently?
Well, let me tell you. I just finished the most recent season of She-Ra, which was really fun. Very epic build-up, so that's exciting. Characters changing quite a bit. So, yeah, it's been an interesting show. It's not like my favorite animated series, but I just can't seem to not watch it. Like, I just feel like I have to know what happens. So, and all the superpowers are kind of cool. So,
for sure.
Anyway, so finished that, and then I've been watching a lot of Studio Ghibli films lately because ever since, like, you know, watching a couple, now I'm just determined to see them all because I love Studio Ghibli films. And so recently watched Kiki's Delivery Service because we just did a pod on that.
Yeah, go listen to that episode.
Absolutely, right, for our live tour panel. That was really fun. I've also watched Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away, and they were both really fun. I just loved it. It was great.
Awesome.
How about you, Kelly?
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about Weathering with you a little more, because I went to go see that in theaters with my sister, and, she and I both absolutely adored it, and again, just how amazing it is to see what Makoto Shinkai will do. I've said this on the podcast before, but animating water and rain and making things look wet, these are like really hard things to do just because there are so many elements and textures and just pieces of the puzzle, you know, to fit and make look good. So of course Shinkai was like, oh, well, we'll just make the whole 2-hour movie about rain.
It's phenomenal.
It's
like
beautiful.
I loved like just focusing on the little raindrops during like just when there would be like a shot of the ground and like puddles. It's breathtaking because it looks so real.
Yes. And every single droplet of water is hand animated, like dropping on people or dropping on the elements around them. It is incredible. It's amazing and beautiful. And of course the story is great, and the characters, man, my heart. I can't wait till we
it's all about those human relationships, people.
Again, yes, communication and relationships. Gosh. That's all I got here. So, thanks for joining me, Emma. This has been a blast.
Oh, I've had so much fun. Literally one of my favorite movies of all time. So, highly recommend it. Go watch it.
I think we're going to go watch it again.
Let's go do it.
Okay, yeah, okay. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to hear more of my thoughts about Japanese animation, I was honored to be on the Banter I Hardly Know Her podcast. That episode is coming out next week, Tuesday, and we're discussing Studio Ghibli films. I highly recommend checking out their other episodes as well. They discuss film and animation quite a bit and are huge Disney fans. Again, that's Banter I Hardly Know Her. Definitely check out their podcast. As always, let us know your thoughts on Your Name or any of Makoto Shinkai's other works on Facebook and Instagram at Fanimated Podcast. You can also reach us by email at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can support the podcast and get behind-the-scenes content at patreon.com/fanimated, and the art for this podcast is done by myself. You can find my illustrations on Instagram at CandorDraw. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music, and a huge thank you to Emma for joining me today. Talk with you all soon, and in the meantime, stay tuned and stay animated. It's really loud.
Another podcast.
Another podcast with Emma.
And Kelly. We should do another theme song. Fanimated.